Steve McNair, the man, the myth, the legend, my childhood hero, number 9. The only Tennessee Titan that's gotten the Titans to a Super Bowl. We all remember that game. It's been played on 30 for 30 in the NFL's greatest games with Kevin Dyson on the 1-yard line. Steve McNair is a Tennessee treasure. I'm bringing him up today because of his legacy and how his lack of estate planning really impacted his family, his wife, Michelle, his 2 sons, Trenton and Tyler, that were his biological children from that marriage, and what happened after the fact. We all remember the unsavory details of Steve, and he was having an affair with a 20-year-old lady, and that deteriorated. We don't know all the facts, but we know the fact is that Steve was murdered, and then it was a murder-suicide, and she took her own life thereafter. And that affected the all sports nation, Tennesseans across the state. His jersey has since been retired. We all have our demons, and unfortunately, that was what that alone has impacted Steve's legacy. But simultaneously, there was a lot more mundane story that was playing out in the court system in Davidson County, and that was his intestate probate estate. So today, we're going to be breaking down his estate. What happened there? Steve died without a last will and testament. He died largely without a trust or any planning. We know that Steve McNair made over $75 million in his NFL career. This was back in the early mid-2000s, and that was a really sizable sum. He was an MVP. I believe that was 2004. But anyways, that's a lot of money. He died with a 545-acre farm in southern Mississippi where he was from. He had a corporation down there that owned that farm. His mother, that he loved dearly, was on 45 acres in a house that was titled in his name. And then there was a 26-bedroom home that was valued at roughly $4 million in Green Hills that he died, and that was also titled in his name. And there was, again, between $40 and $70 million, that also comprised his financial estate. And there's not a will, okay? And so in Tennessee, when an individual passes away with assets in their name, those go into probate court. Under that law, your heirs at law will receive your estate. The surviving spouse gets a third, but no more than 40% of the net estate, and then the other biological children will all receive in equal shares. And so in this case, Michelle would receive 40% of the net estate, and then his other 4 children. He had 2 children out of wedlock before he married Michelle. Those are his biological sons, and then Trenton and Tyler were also heirs that he had from his marriage. And so there was 5 different heirs. We don't know what Steve McNair wanted. We know that he likely wanted to protect Michelle. She didn't receive the entire estate. These 4 young men, 2 of whom, Trenton and Tyler, were 5 and 11 at his date of death. The court set up trust for them, but they received millions and millions of dollars. And these 2 other boys that were born out of wedlock also were heirs to the estate, and they received millions upon millions of dollars. He loved his mother, and this is a big portion of the story. She was in this home in Mississippi. 2 different states that he had to open up probate in, okay? And in Mississippi, mom's living in this beautiful home that he cared for. He grew up in abject poverty, okay, in southern Mississippi. He was a good old country boy, rags to riches story, and he loved his mom. And when he passed away, his mom was living in that mansion in Mississippi on 50 acres of land. And, he didn't have a will. He didn't have a trust directing that property to mom. That house was in his name. And Michelle forced her out. She asked for her to pay large sums of rent that this woman did not have, and so that she ultimately was evicted. And that property came into the estate. And so that legacy dramatically impacted Steve McNair's mother. And then also you have Michelle, who is not left as the primary beneficiary. All these sons received significant portions of the estate. There was nearly 600 acres in Mississippi that got brought into the estate. The other big issue here is there were millions of dollars in attorney's fees. There was massive publicity. His legacy had already been tarnished to a degree from the affair and the murder, but the publicity of his estate from this high net worth individual having to be drugged through the court system in both Tennessee and Mississippi was also not a great look, and not something that he ever would have bargained for at the end of his life. The story here for all of us, right? It doesn't matter if there's $2 million, $500,000, or in the case of Steve McNair, $75 to $90 million. When an individual dies intestate, their assets are brought into the purview of the probate court system, and Tennessee's state plan is kicked in for that person. That most certainly was not Steve McNair's plan. We know that much. There actually were a couple of wills that were not executed, so there's a little bit of an understanding of what he did want, but he never completed an estate plan. And so the Tennessee statute is what came into play, and then Mississippi's as well. That failed his mother. It largely failed his wife. We don't know what he wanted to do for all his boys, but it really, the plan was extremely litigious and it was extremely complex. We see lots of clients where assets are not titled jointly among spouses. They may be on a second marriage. There may have been a divorce. Or in the case of Steve McNair's family, assets just weren't titled jointly. They were his assets, and we don't understand why, but everything was titled in his name. And that created a very unique administration. The point is, you need an estate plan to avoid the intestate process. We've seen heartbreak after heartbreaking story right here in Tennessee, where a variety of middle-class families think that one thing is going to happen, but because there was not a will, there was not a trust in place, the Tennessee statute, that's called the laws of intestacy, is what is administered in the court system, and that leads to really inequitable results. We would love to work with you and your family so that we can avoid the tragedy that happened to Steve McNair. And in sum, I would just like to say, Steve McNair, for all of his faults, was truly a Tennessee legend. But there's lots of lessons that we all can apply in our own personal lives to make sure that the planning and the administration of that estate does not happen to our lives. So we love to work with you. If you found this engaging, interesting, please go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button, and we'd love to work with you and your family. So give us a call.